By the grace of Allah, by the grace of Allah.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Amma ba'd, fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. My dear respected viewers of Madani Channel, you're watching program Rise and Shine, and segment is Health is Wealth. Today we have got Dr. Shehzad Hussain Ashrafi with us, who is consultant and serving in one of the UK-based hospitals. Let's go towards him. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Dr. How are you doing? You okay?
Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal.
MashaAllah. Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you so much for giving us your precious time once again. We've been talking about stroke, and you have specialized in this subject. So Doctor, we talked about in last episode, that was regarding one of the main leading causes of stroke, which we talked about, diabetes. And what is another leading cause? Let's talk about.
So today we'll talk about other type of stroke, which is bleeding in the stroke. So there are two types of the stroke. 80% of the stroke is caused by blood clot, and 20% of the stroke is caused by hemorrhage, which is normally brain hemorrhage. That is other type of stroke.
Okay.
The consequences of both types of the strokes are the same.
Okay.
Long term. What causes cerebral hemorrhage? There are various causes, but one of the important cause is the blood pressure.
Okay.
Persistent high blood pressure. When we say persistent high blood pressure, means there's systolic blood pressure, which is the top reading, normally in a layman term, what we say.
Yeah.
If somebody have above 145,
okay,
that tends to raise an alarm that this patient has a tendency to high blood pressure and should go to see their doctor immediately.
Okay.
Now, what happens as somebody have persistent high blood pressure, it damages the lining of the blood vessels and it weakens the blood vessels. Also, it reduces the elasticity of a blood vessels by damaging the blood vessels. Eventually, one of the blood vessels will give away, causes a burst, like people to have a burst water pipe into the garden. There will be burst blood vessel into the brain, blood will seep out, and the brain, the blood is irony that the blood itself is a toxin when it goes into the brain tissues. And
as long as it is within the arteries, it's all okay.
It is good. As soon as it comes out, it is toxin. It becomes toxin to the brain tissue, and tissue start dying and causes a paralysis and all the same symptoms what people do experience in the other type of strokes. So that is one of the very important and leading cause of the stroke.
So viewers of Madani Channel, you heard that it's all linked to each other. Diabetes with stroke, high blood pressure with stroke. So it's very important that we keep control of our high blood pressures. Doctor, why does it cause, let's talk about a bit of blood pressure. It's very important. What puts pressure onto blood in a layman term?
So blood pressure, in a simple term, is the pressure which is felt by the walls of the blood vessels.
Yeah.
That pressure is called the blood pressure.
Yeah.
Now, there are various reasons why somebody would have a high blood pressure. One of the reasons is because of excessive deposition of a cholesterol into the lining of a blood vessels.
Okay.
The blood vessel get hardened, they lose their elasticity, the lumen of the vessels get narrowed. Thus, the blood have a smaller path to travel, and therefore it causes more pressure. A simple physics.
Right.
The narrower the pipe, the higher the pressure.
True.
So that's one of the reasons. So the cholesterol control is important to maintain a blood pressure.
Okay.
That's the first cause. Second is often we find a young patient who comes with a high blood pressure. This particular cause I would like to stress upon is because of this is not recognized in a layman's and normal population as it could be a cause of the blood pressure. It's called obstructive sleep apnea.
I see, yes.
So what happens in many of the people, particularly who are obese, their jaw geometry and their windpipe geometry get obscured because of the excessive fat deposition.
Okay.
And because of that, when they sleep, this partial obstruction causes a snoring, and occasionally there
stops the oxygen.
So they their wind pipe get obstructed. intermittently. If you ask their wives or their partners what they experience is somebody watch them, they have a long snoring habits, and people say, doctor, I feel as if my husband or my wife is stopping breathing in between the night. That is often one of the reason, one of the symptom of recognize. When there is a persistent, there's deprivation of oxygen to the brain think, oh, I'm not getting oxygen. That means the blood pressure is not enough for blood to reach me. So it commands the heart that I need higher pressure so that I can have a better oxygenation in my tissue.
Which results high blood
which
pressure.
results in a high blood pressure. Also, it happens the other way is when there is a constant lack of oxygen into the blood, it commands the body to produce more red blood cells. So red blood cells, so there are three types of cells present in our body. One is red blood cells, which has iron and hemoglobin. The white blood cells, which is, in a way, it acts as a defense against all the bugs and organisms to provide us an immunity. And the third one is the platelets. These are small protein fragments which create a plug when there is a blood vessel, when there is a bleeding, and stops having further bleeding. So
it's also a blessing of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala.
Alhamdulillah. So when an oxygen is carried by red blood cells, so when there is a constant deprivation of oxygen sensed by a brain, it commands body to produce more red blood cells. So the oxygenation can be improved. As a result, there is excessive presence of red blood cells into the body, which we call polycythemia. What happens to the blood is blood get thicker. So blood viscosity get thicker. So it increases resistance against free flowing into the blood vessels.
I see.
When thicker fluid always have a difficulty to pass through versus thinner fluid. So flow will get reduced, there's a more stagnation, and this increased viscosity reduce oxygenation further to the tissues. And there is this vicious cycle continues, and people often have high blood pressure, and as a consequence, they do have a stroke and even a heart attack as well as your consequences of that. How to treat this condition? There is unfortunately no medication or a cure for the treatment, but there is a quick specialist assessment when you recognize the symptom that your husband or wife is snoring in the night and you feel as if they are stopping breathing in between. You please take them to the hospital. Other symptom often is people dozed off in the daytime at the work, and they will have a lack of energy. They will feel as if they are not being able to sleep enough. They feel not fresh in the morning. When they get up, they feel they are more tired, they are more fatigued, they are more irritable. Their mental health also affected because of that, because constant feeling of lack of sleep. They need to have an assessment by a sleep specialist, and often they require treatment there's a machine called a CPAP, constant positive pressure machine, are given, and long term they not only reduce the blood pressure, but they have a better quality of life.
Lots of people, just maybe 1 minute left. I would like to ask a very important question for those, they are patients of high blood pressure, and as you said, it's one of the main leading causes for a brain hemorrhage. So now the high blood pressure, if somebody wants to control in a very short span of time, how could you advise them?
First thing is limit the salt intake. Salt has a direct link with blood pressure. So try to limit your salt, table salt, or choose alternative salt such as rock salt if you can use it. That has a better alternative than the table salt, sodium chloride. Other thing is try to limit your free fatty high fat intake. So try to minimize the fat intake, increase vegetables, increase the fruit intake, increase green vegetables, green leaves, salads and things like that. Increase fish. Fish is very important. Fish has a lot of benefits. So I would suggest try to replace your meat intake with a fish, or try to use white meat instead of a red meat. If you're using a red meat, try to use a lean meat instead of a full fat meat. And these are the simple thing people can do, and that would have a very positive effect. And the same thing I said in the last segment, minimum 3 hours of exercise. Minimum means brisk walking, fast walking is the minimum you can do. 3 hours in a week. That's recommended by WHO. There is no limit of how much you should do in the most.
Subhanallah. Thank you so much, Dr. It was really helpful. Dear Islamic brothers and viewers of Madani Channel, we have tried to cover one of the main leading causes of brain hemorrhage today, which is high blood pressure. I hope you must have benefited. Keep watching Rise and Shine Madani Channel. Inshallah, we'll come back with another interesting, informative topic in segment Health is Wealth. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
By the grace of Allah, by the grace of Allah, we love Madani Channel, we love Madani Channel, we love Madani Channel.